Is really what my question was.
Yeah, no, that's true, and you know, I think one of the, I'm a statistician, partly because it was helping me with the betting, but I think it's remarkable how little use we make of world statistics to try and describe and think about and talk about some of the issues. I mean, Catherine brought up earlier a whole bunch of social enterprise statistics or whatever they were, and said, look at the, you know, I mean, you know, you presented it like a blur almost. That you know, but for me, rhetorically, numbers are very effective. If I can come up with numbers that people will can feel they grasp and may remember. So yeah, I think this is an important point. I mean, that the important point must surely be that we need to simplify in order to engage more effectively with all the concrete details that we need to. And I mean, in Jean-Louis' case, for example, I mean, when he says the only kind of firm you can set up in France is a capitalist firm. So what other kinds of firm might be one? Then you have to work in detail on the legislation of other possibilities for forming enterprise. So you have to bite off some bits that make sense, and you know, and probably not as individuals, but collectively. But I mean, I think the thing that's extraordinary about quantification, especially modern quantification after Descartes, you know, in which you conceive of number as points in an abstract space, that modern science, you know, has the power that it does because it creates incredible simplified abstractions that allow us to engage in amazing detail, you know, even, you know, much more than we could before. So maybe this kind of institutionalist line, you know, let's complicate things, let's get into the concrete particulars. I mean, we have to counter those with some good, simple abstractions that would help to point us through it.
Can I ask something? It's more to Jean-Louis.
Yeah.
If I understood well, you said, well, like you suggested to get rid or to abandon, on the one hand, what you call monolithic thinking, and on the other hand, the dualistic thinking, which is kind of trying to complement the market with the state, right? Yeah. And I understand what you are saying here, but then while I was listening to you, I was thinking, well, somebody like Cameron would agree probably with that, you know. So I was thinking, like, very concretely and pragmatically, what is happening here in the UK. So I don't know. I'd like to listen, even to you, Keith, if you have something to say about even.
For answering you, I will
no, I mean,
because it's unpleasant not to look at you.
Sit on that. That's right. Yeah, because I think it's this is a big issue, right? I mean. What's the alternative to social democracies or social liberalism or whatever we want to call it? And this is a dramatic place and period to ask this question, I think.
I think it's a very strong and interesting question. And I will refer also to the preceding question, because when we speak about economy, we speak about flux, about information, and we have the impression that everything can be in one single economy. And I think that we can learn, for instance, from Latin America experience when we look at the new constitutions of Bolivia or Ecuador, for instance. What are they assuming? That the fact that there is not economy, there are plural economies, which means that in the process of so-called modernization, it was necessary to invalidate symbolically all the indigenous economies, for instance, to say that they are archaic and that the only modern economy is market capitalism, and that it was a long process which had very many concrete consequences for this country. And when they want now not to have the maximization of growth like the objective of economy, but rather the buen vivir, as I said, has something which is an arrangement, institutional arrangement, as you said, of plural economies, I think it's given a part of the answer, because what they are recognizing is that economies are partly also a public question. And I think that what is different from the Cameron discourse, as far as I understand it, is that they are privatizing civil society, as you said, in this discourse. So we see it also in a country like France. We had a rather strong movement of solidarity economy, but this movement is depoliticized by social entrepreneurship, which is only taking it as a way of combining corporate social responsibility with associationism, but turned only to social entrepreneurship. And I think that it's also the way to see that the question is not how to add something to an economy to make it more moral, in a sense of moralizing capitalism, for instance, but it's how to recognize different logic of action and forms of motivation inside economies, and to put it also as a political question. That some parts of these economies are not recognized by public powers, for instance, and they have to be recognized in their dimension, which is both economic and political. And it's a very difficult process, because we have, even in social sciences, the habit to divide between what is economic and what is political sphere. And I think that these social initiatives we are speaking of are crossing the borders between economic and political sphere. And of course there is a huge discourse now in Europe, and not only in Europe, to retreat this only to social business, like a little economic affair completing the real activity which is by multinationals. And I think that the question is really good, because in a certain way the discourse of civil society, the discourse of economy by the people themselves is similar to certain accents of neoliberalism as it is rebuilt right now in the beginning of this new century.
I mean, I actually think we're at a very early stage in trying to make sense of this huge swing from post-war social democracy to neoliberalism, and to conceive of ways forward. And I think our political vocabulary is very primitive and for dealing with this. And I think it's partly because we haven't identified what the real questions are that we should be or are fighting about, because there are so many different layers of rhetoric and obscuring and so on. But if, for example, I mean, one of the main themes of contemporary politics is, should the nation-state retain and strengthen its powers to organize society, or should we accept as inevitable or desirable a strengthening of global political, legal and social organization? And the people who you would find on either side of that division, the globalists and the nationalists, if you like. I mean, the nationalists would include unions, Greens, anti-immigration, fascists, all kinds of you know, and the globalizers include the corporations. They include the Outer Globalists, the World Social Forum, and so on and so forth. So if you say, you know, well, you propose X or Y, but then you pick somebody you don't like out and say, but that person says something similar to that. I mean, one point is, well, yeah, it's not, I mean, I think because the politics are inchoate, it's not surprising that you find the world isn't divided into two great classes of right and left, of workers and capitalists or whatever, and you know, this polarization has not occurred, or it's not occurring in the way that was once understood, and as a result you have incoherent association on the same side of major political issues. And secondly, you know, somebody like Cameron doesn't mean what he says. So, I mean, you know, they say, I mean, you know, like yesterday, I mean, like it's a big deal, you know, that you know, we have produced the most stringent controls on banks in the world, you know, and it's revealed, you know, that they actually did their best to undermine European restrictions placed on banks. And then, you know, they say, and the economy is recovering, and they say, well, unfortunately, it went into reverse last quarter, and they say, just the snow, just the snow. so you know, I mean, but I think the key thing, I mean, my mentor was this old West Indian revolutionary, C.L.R. James, and he says the bigger, you know, if you're a politically motivated intellectual, the thing you have to answer is, what are the sides that matter, and which side am I on? And then you play for your side. People used to say to him, you know, do you think we're going to win? He says, I don't know. I just know what side I'm on, and I'll do my best for that side. So, and it may be that the side that you identify with has some really unpleasant fellow travelers.
I was going to make a little addition, I think it's a question maybe. It occurs to me that most likely 15, 20 years from now, when historians talk about neoliberalism, they'll say it ended in 2008. It's just too soon to tell what we're in now. I mean, if you think about it, like we now talk about the neoliberalism as something that really came in the late 70s, early 80s, that nobody in the 80s even had that word with it. Nobody really knew what they were in. Presumably it'll take another 10 years before there's any consensus what we're in now. And in fact, right now we're fighting over it. So, I mean, it might be helpful just to change the rubric and just, for once in history, actually acknowledge that. You know?
I ought to say that, yeah, thanks, David, because one of the things I didn't mention about my own motivation was that I was sure that a time would come fairly soon when this excluded French economic sociology discourse would be seen to be intensely relevant to, in a way that it would not, I mean, you know, it could not be when the credit boom was on the roll. I mean, I do believe that 2008 was that turning point, and I do believe that free market economics has been holed beneath the water. That doesn't mean there aren't people still pushing it and the ideas that support it, but I think it becomes a lot more difficult to claim that, you know, the best of all possible worlds is one in which markets are free to operate without any form of social control. Nobody believes that anymore. Nobody, you know, not even Cameron is claiming that anymore. So, but you're right. I think that's what I meant when I said it's inchoate, it's incoherent. It's hard for us to see past this uncertainty.
And partly because it's still up in the air, we don't know. I mean, we can play a part in this.
Well, you know, the double dip recession. Nouriel Roubini for Nobel Prize.
We're going to end on double dip recession. I was just going to say, I have three things I'd scribbled down. One was something we were talking about at the very beginning, back at 2 o'clock, which was if anybody had any thoughts about, and you touched on this as well, about actually how to get this book out there and how to extend it. I don't know if possibly now is not the time, but if people do have ideas, send emails, communicate. So I think, you know...
You should have had a book, should have had a box of them today.
Yes. Possibly, well, that's true, but also in terms of, I mean, you know, The Guardian, appropriate fora who are going to...
We have no